Good morning. Is this on? You hear me okay? Yes. Okay. This is one of those things you're challenged with if you're not used to speaking with a mic attached to your face. It's a little bit uncomfortable at first. So like Jason said, today we're going to talk about the issue of human trafficking. How many of you have an awareness about human trafficking by a raised hand? Okay, so do you have a limited awareness or a broad awareness? Who has a broader awareness? Anyone? Okay, a couple of you. Okay, well, about 11 years ago, the issue of human trafficking was brought to my attention while I was at a conference. And some of you may have been at that conference. I think Jamie was. Where did Jamie go? At the Joyce Meyer conference, where they shared their ministry, Hand of Hope, and they showed how they went into brothels in India. They showed how these women lived and all the things that they had to endure. But then they also showed a ministry where they went in and helped these women to find freedom. And they gave them a safe place to live. They gave them a new life. So they were able to learn new skills and get counseling and things to bring healing to their lives so they could have a fresh start. Now, this is a sensitive topic that we're going to be talking about today. So if you get uncomfortable at any time, please feel free to just walk out. Nobody's going to be concerned about you leaving, although I hope someone will check up on you if you do. This is a topic that not many people are talking about, but you may have heard a lot about it this month because this is National Human Trafficking Awareness Month. My experience with human trafficking is not a personal one, but I could have been trafficked as a little girl. People that are trafficked are people that are vulnerable, people that have been abused in the past, or they've been exposed to domestic violence or situations that were hard for them in their families. And when I was a little girl, those things were going on in my home. There was domestic violence, there was abuse, there was alcoholism, there was a lot of vulnerabilities. And when I was in middle school, someone preyed on those things and found a vulnerable girl who was willing to allow someone in. Now, I wasn't trafficked, but I was molested. There was a man that was in my neighborhood. He was like a grandfather. He would come around, he'd ride his bike. He would talk to all the kids. He'd talk to the parents. He'd make relationships. He made people feel like he was a good guy. And then he started to invite us to his home. And at first, it was a group of girls that would go to his home. And he would give us chicken noodle soup. And he would give us orange juice, which we didn't know was spiked with vodka. So he was taking advantage of not only our vulnerabilities, but also what he was creating an atmosphere of. And during this time, I became more and more trustworthy of this man, and then I would be with him by myself. And during that time, he touched me and said that I wasn't supposed to tell anybody. But before long, it got out that not only was he doing this to me, but he was doing it to other girls in my neighborhood, and he was arrested. And he called me on the phone one day, and he said, "Don't tell anybody what happened." And what happened with him was that they went into his home, and they found hundreds of photos of girls, and also videos of child pornography. And he served the rest of his life in jail. But between the time of his case and the court, he had called me multiple times and said, "Don't tell anybody what happened. I'll hurt you, I'll hurt your family." And so I was afraid, and I didn't want to tell. So when the police came to my house to question me, I denied it. And so this is what you're going to find with a lot of people that these things happen to. There's shame, there's guilt, there's condemnation. For a long time, I thought it was my fault, that I did something wrong. But that's not true, because someone preyed on my vulnerabilities. And with people that are trafficked, that's what's happening to them too. People are preying on the vulnerabilities of other people. And so today we're going to talk about this topic and go into it for a little bit more detail, but it is a tough topic. So like I said, if you feel like you can't handle this topic, it's okay for you to go ahead and walk out at any point. So the definition of human trafficking is it's modern-day slavery, which involves the use of force, fraud, and coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex act. Any individual engaging in commercial sex under the age of 18 is automatically human trafficking, and it does not require force, fraud, or coercion. So, under those circumstances, if someone is a prostitute and they decided to go into prostitution, but someone else is forcing them, they're keeping the money, they're coercing them, then that's when it becomes human trafficking. So what is force, fraud, and coercion? Force is physical assault, sexual assault, confinement, drugs. These things are used to keep people under the control of the trafficker. Fraud, false promises about work and living conditions. This happens a lot for people that are trafficked to come to the United States to work. So in labor trafficking, they're promised a job, they get here, that job's not the one they thought it was going to be, the living conditions aren't what they thought they were going to be, they aren't getting paid the wage that they were promised. So that's where fraud comes in. Coercion, threats of harm or deportation, debt bondage, psychological manipulation. With trafficking, psychological manipulation is a huge part. When we think about slavery, we think about people being enchained. This is still slavery, but people are enchained in a different way, in their minds. It's the manipulation that happens psychologically that keeps people enslaved. Okay, you can go to the next one. So the types of sex trafficking: outdoor solicitation, prostitution, escort services. Have you ever seen those ads or gotten them in your email? They're out there so that people can easily prostitute themselves, but without having to stand on the street corner. Pornography industry, illicit massage parlors, brothels, and strip clubs. Illicit massage parlors. Did anyone realize that we had an illicit massage parlor right here in Cambridge that was shut down recently? Is anybody aware of that? Okay, so it was right on Route 50 between Maryland Avenue and right by Popeyes, right? Is that where it's in that vicinity? And it was a business that was set up as a massage parlor. It had a sign on the front. But the one thing that was different about that business was there was a buzzer on the front door, so you couldn't get in unless you buzzed in. And there was this open sign was only on at night. So concerned citizens started to see that some things were going on in that business, and so they reported it to the police. They started to survey it, and then they shut it down. So if you see something, say something. If it doesn't look right, open up your mouth and say something about it. Okay, the next one. Can we change our perception about prostitution? Look at the life of Rahab. She was a prostitute, and God had a greater plan for her life. She's in the lineage of Jesus because of her obedience. Rahab was the one who allowed the two spies to come and be hidden in her home while they were spying out the promised land. And when they left, she let them down because her place was on the city wall. And so she let them down at night, and they escaped. And then when they came back, they told her, if you have all of your family in your room, then they'll be saved. And she had to have a scarlet cord that identified her so that they would not come and get her and her family. So Rahab, not only was she was able to help during that time, but because of that, she was a part of the lineage of Jesus. I mean, how huge is that? She was also mentioned in Matthew in the lineage of Jesus, and also in Hebrews chapter 11 in the Faith Hall of Fame. So Rahab was given a promise, and that was something that she was able to receive because she followed after what God asked her to do. So we have to look at people who are in these places of prostitution or hard times or doing things that they wouldn't normally do and realize that God has a greater plan for them. So if they can come out of that lifestyle and be reconciled with God and given a new path, then we never know what could happen in their lives. And the woman at the well, she was an outcast, but Jesus knew that she needed love, compassion, and acceptance, and he offered forgiveness, and she became whole. And this is what we want to do to the people that are in those situations. We want to offer them love, compassion, and the opportunity to become whole. Okay? So types of labor trafficking, you'll see that with seasonal workers. There was a business and secretary that was cited for labor trafficking. And the woman that was working there was brought here from Mexico. She had to pay 10,000 pesos in order to get here. So automatically, she's in debt bondage. And then when she got here, the living conditions were not that good. And she did not earn the wage that they promised. So she thought these things just didn't seem right, so she reported it, and then that business was shut down because of it. You'll see it in agriculture, domestic work, restaurants, cleaning services, carnivals, anywhere where someone is not getting paid their fair wage for the job that they're doing, or they're not being treated properly in that. Okay? So slavery's been an issue for centuries. Think about Joseph. He was sold into slavery by his own brothers. And God used him in a mighty way to save many, including his only family members. So slavery's not a new problem. It just looks different than what we thought it did. And in this modern age, it's hidden in such a good way that we don't recognize it anymore. The Israelites were in slavery, and they needed someone to set them free. And once they left, they grumbled and complained and wanted to go back to the life of slavery because it was comfortable. And that's what we find with the victims of human trafficking. Once they're out of that situation and you start to help them get on the right path, they may feel like they want to go back to that life again. And it's a cycle that repeats itself over and over again. They say on average it takes about 7 to 8 times for a person to leave the situation they're in to really want to set roots and start a new life. So who are the survivors? This is from the Polaris Project, which is a great website if you wanted to go on there and look for some more information about human trafficking. And these statistics are from 2018, so the entire United States. There's a human trafficking hotline, which I'll give you the number at the end, but these are statistics. So who are the survivors? Adults, 10,731. Minors, 4,945. Unknown, 7,402. So when someone calls the hotline, they can give them their information or they can leave out some parts of it. The gender is female, 15,042. Male, 2,017. Gender minorities, 109. And unknown, 5,010. I think the unknown is there because they're saying now that just as many men are trafficked as women, but I'll have questions at the end. But they're not reporting as much as women are because of the stigma that's associated with it and the shame that goes along with being trafficked. Latinos is the top number for trafficking, 2,348, along with Asian second at 1,809. And African American, 1,072, women or white, 989, and multi-ethnic, 184. So these are just the statistics from people calling into the hotline. So imagine how many more are out there that haven't reported. There's a lot more. Okay? Vulnerabilities. The homeless and runaways are vulnerable to human trafficking. They say within the first 48 hours, 1 out of 7 kids who are homeless will be picked up by a trafficker. Prior abuse or violence, victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, foreign nationals and undocumented individuals, and substance abuse. They find that substance abuse and human trafficking go hand in hand because the traffickers use out the drugs in order to help the women and the men to do what they want them to do. The risk factors. Recent migration and relocation, substance use, unstable housing, runaways and homeless, mental health concerns. So what are the methods of force, fraud, and coercion? Isolation and confinement, economic abuse, threats of any kind, emotional abuse, physical abuse. And who can help? Family and friends, law enforcement, criminal justice systems, health services, mobile apps and social media, and the child welfare system. Okay. So there are stages of grooming. Just like I was telling you the story about what happened to me, this is what happens to victims of human trafficking. Their victim is targeted, so they'll look for vulnerable people. Then they'll gain trust and information. They can do this either by talking to that person directly, their friends, their family members. They're really good at building relationships. Filling a need. So maybe this girl comes from a troubled home. The guy will start to pretend that he's really interested in her romantically. So he starts to come alongside of her, show interest in her, take her shopping, buy her things, get her nails done, get her hair done, do things that will make her feel good about herself. And then he'll begin to isolate her from other people. And I say her because her is who we generally work with, but there is both, it's not biased. Both genders are affected. And then the abuse begins after the isolation. And then the person will maintain control by, like I talked about earlier, the manipulation, the psychological, the abuse, threatening to hurt their family members if they don't do what they want them to do. Okay, next one. The average age of a sex trafficking victim is 12 to 14 years old. That's for girls. For boys, it's 11 to 13. Older guys will usually pretend to be interested romantically. They'll buy gifts, get their nails done, and then they'll ask them to earn that money back. So in order to do that, she has to prostitute herself. Once a girl is trafficked, her trafficker may ask her to recruit other girls. So he'll say, like, in your school, do you know other girls in your school that would want to do this? And so she starts to recruit other girls as well. Okay, next one. So what is our part? According to James 1:27, true spirituality that is pure in the eyes of our Father God is to make a difference in the lives of the orphans and widows and their troubles and refuse to be corrupted by the world's values. So the Bible tells us that we are to come alongside orphans and widows. So who are the orphans and widows? What makes somebody an orphan or a widow? Next. It's one who has no protector, no provider. Think about a lot of the homes that kids are in these days. A lot of times it's one-parent homes. Sometimes the father's not involved. They don't feel protected. They don't feel provided for. They're vulnerable. Charisma magazine says, in the days of Jesus, to be an orphan meant that a child had no one to provide for or protect them. Subsequently, their lives were often tragic as boys became slaves and girls became prostitutes. How is that any different than it is today? It's very similar to in Jesus' time, where kids had to go to another means to find that protection and to find that support. Okay, next one. So this is a survivor story that we're going to watch, and I'm going to tell you in advance that it is, she is a little graphic. She shares some information that tells exactly about her story, but I think it's important for you to see because of the end of the story.
And got help at the right time, allowed her to escape. A warning here, some viewers might be alarmed by what you hear in this story. Here's NBC 26's Juliana Falk.
Colleen Stratton is a wife, a mother, an advocate for survivors of sex trafficking. Looking at her now, you wouldn't know she was a victim herself, but she says it all started at the tender age of 5 when she was sexually abused.
I know that two things really took root in me, and that was shame and fear. And it really changed me and changed the course of my life forever.
She says her life turned into trying to cope with the pain, keeping it a secret.
So that led me down a really dark path.
And at the age of 7,
I began cutting myself, and just as a way of trying to take that pain that was on the inside and move it to the outside.
She turned to using drugs and alcohol at age 11.
And as the addiction kind of progressed, my life just became more and more out of control and spiraled.
In her early 20s, her parents told her they feared for her life.
By then, I was overdosing on a regular basis.
She says they told her they found a treatment center in Florida and put her on a plane with some money. Instead of going to the treatment center, she went to the beach and used some of the money to get a hotel room.
When that money ran out, I literally lived on the beach. One day I was standing outside of a liquor store and I had just stolen a bottle of liquor. And I was sick and withdrawing from drugs and alcohol. And this man came up to me and he said, "Are you doing all right?"
She says anyone who would have taken a look at her would know she was not okay.
And he said, "Well, I have a place that you can stay. I have a bunch of people living with me and I can help you get back on your feet."
So she went with him.
There was really no fear about going with a strange man. Like, I literally I didn't care anymore.
She says all she cared about was getting off the streets and to get that next high to cover up the pain she was still feeling inside. She went to the house with him where 4 other women were living. She says it was a haze of drugs and alcohol for a few days.
He shot me up with heroin, and I can just remember like coming in and out of it and seeing these women come in and out of the house.
And one day,
he came in with 3 other men, and they all raped me. And he said, "You know, nothing's free in this life, baby. So if you want to stay here, then you can earn your stay."
during her initiation into the life, she was taken to a stretch of highway where prostitutes walk.
The reality set in and of what I had gotten myself into.
Colleen felt like she had no other option, that no one would want her or to help her.
I felt like I had sunk too low, made too many bad decisions and choices, that this was the life that I had chosen and that this is what I deserved.
She says at first her trafficker was charismatic, flattering, and then he became angry, instilling more fear and shame into Colleen.
He used to go from girl to girl in the house and he would hold a gun to our heads and he would say, "Which one of you feels like dying tonight?" And then he'd pull the trigger and it would be an empty chamber.
Colleen says in these moments she wasn't afraid to die. She was afraid to keep living and didn't know how to leave.
I couldn't see how I had been coerced, how I had been deceived, and that I was just acting out of my pain and just trying to survive.
She says the heroin addiction fueled her to stay. She was being sold 10, 12 times a day.
Every night, every shift that we were taken out to the stroll or taken out to the truck stop or to motels, we would have to make between $800 to $1,000 in order to be picked up by him. And so if we didn't make that quota, either we would not be picked up, we would be left out there, or he'd pick us up, but we'd have a punishment at home waiting for us.
Finally, one day she was all alone in the house, filled with cockroaches and broken bottles.
I was on the floor and I had just gotten a really bad beating.
She says she heard the voices of so many women she met while in a treatment center.
There was one nurse in particular that was amazing, and she said, "You know, Colleen, here's my home phone number. I don't do this very often, but if you ever want to leave, call me day or night and I'll come and get you."
So she called the nurse.
And she said, "Just keep walking, I'll be there." And she did. She picked me up and she got me into a treatment center that was 5 hours away.
She stayed at the center for almost a year before returning to Wisconsin.
I went back to using drugs and alcohol again. And in 2009, I ended up in jail again.
She says she was all alone in a cell detoxing. The only thing she was given, a Bible. So she met with a chaplain and began her true healing process.
I can tell you that apart from Jesus, like there's no way that I would be here today with the life that I have today, with the peace and the healing that I have today.
Colleen, now a wife and mother to 4 beautiful children.
I had a doctor tell me after I had left the life that the chances of me being able to have children would be very small, just based on all the injuries and the things that I had sustained. And really to have the life that I have today, to have 4 healthy, beautiful kids, and a husband who knows my scars, who sees my scars and thinks that I'm beautiful anyway, really just speaks to the heart of who God is.
Colleen now uses her own story of survival to help other survivors of sex trafficking, giving presentations, meeting with survivors in jail, and fighting for every survivor out there, showing them hope and the beauty in life that lies on the other side when they can't see it for themselves yet. Keeping you connected, Juliana Falk, NBC 26.
And there is a number on your screen right here, 1-888-373-7888. Confidential help 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Okay, that was a hard story to watch, but the end is what we want to help with, is the redemption part of it, because we know that the only hope that we have is in Jesus, and he can help to restore the lives of the women that have been affected, and he's the answer to what they need. So here are some red flags that you can look for. signs of physical abuse such as burns, bruises, or cuts, unexplained absence from school, inappropriate dress or changes in behavior, someone who's withdrawn, depressed, distracted, stressed out, displays expensive clothes, accessories, or shoes that they probably can't afford themselves, new tattoos, normally on the neck area, like they're small, like name, money symbol, barcode, older boyfriends or new friends with a different lifestyle, has multiple phones or phone numbers, and cannot talk freely or under someone's control. So this could be whether, like multiple things that are going on there with that person. So you don't want to just look for one, you want to look for multiples. Next. So why don't they just leave? A lot of victims feel that they don't realize that they're victims. They blame themselves. They feel like they're the ones to blame. They're ashamed of what they did, of what happened to them. They fear the trafficker, or they could have a trauma bond with the trafficker. They explain it to be like Stockholm syndrome, where the person makes a bond with the person that did something wrong to them, and it's hard to break. She might not be ready to leave the life. Like I talked about earlier, it takes about 7 to 8 times for a person to attempt to leave that they're ready to leave. Usually trafficking and addiction goes hand in hand, and treatment for addiction could be the first step in someone getting help. Women who have been trafficked need mental health treatment by those qualified to address complex trauma, because it's layer upon layer of trauma that needs to be addressed. And some women may benefit from a long-term restorative care program. Which brings us to Harriet's house. Harriet's house was started in 2017. My husband and I started this nonprofit organization, and the name comes from Harriet Tubman, except we had to add extra T because they wouldn't let us have the name with just one. So Harriet's house was established to provide long-term restorative care for women who've been trafficked. We came up with the name because we were walking through the Harriet Tubman Visitor Center, and we were impacted by the life that Harriet lived and her dependence on God. And plus, she helped slaves to get free. And we're dealing with the issue of modern day slavery. So we thought, what a perfect role model to look after is Harriet Tubman. So this is where Harriet came from, okay? So the vision is to combat human trafficking and bring freedom and healing to women who've been sexually exploited, through raising awareness, educating communities, and providing outreach, drop-in centers, and establishing long-term restorative care. We already have a drop-in center that opened in September of 2019, and it allows community members to drop in during the day to have access to resources and referrals, emergency food pantry, toiletries, computer access, a place to rest and relax, offering skill development classes and screening for human trafficking. So when someone comes in, it's a pretty simple process. They have to fill out an application, meet with an intake specialist. We determine their most urgent needs and screen for human trafficking. We do that by asking just a short series of questions that if they say yes to these questions, then it's an indicator that they could have been trafficked. We are currently working with a client who has been trafficked. Her story began when she was 15, and she's been trafficked. She's been in and out of homeless shelters, addictions programs, transitional housing. She's been in all types of programs, but nobody ever asked her if she had been trafficked until she walked into our drop-in center. So we need to learn how to recognize these signs, and if you see what they are, then you can report them. You can either call us and tell us that you think you have somebody that maybe they can come by and speak to us, or by calling the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Now, I'm not done with that one yet. All right, so what we do is if we can't help them, then we refer them to other resources in the community. We offer help with toiletry items, self-care items, and an emergency food pantry. We offer classes to develop skills, and we offer case management for women who've been trafficked or have been sexually exploited. So we're not limited to just women who've been trafficked. We can help women who've been exploited too. And there's way more of those than you can imagine. And connect them with a residential program when they're ready. So in the drop-in center, we have activities that they can do. It's a safe place for any woman to come. So it doesn't have to be associated with trafficking or exploitation. Just if somebody needs a safe place to be, they can come in and receive services. Okay? So we will be establishing teams that'll be trained to go into areas at night where prostitution is prevalent, to establish relationships with sex workers and give them information about leaving the life that they're living, and to support them as they make their choice to leave. But our ultimate goal is residential care, where we will have a house somewhere in Dorchester County, which is it's yet to be determined, where we'll teach life skills and include activities to promote healing. It'll be a 2-year restorative care program that will be at no cost to the woman that comes in. It'll be a 24/7 facility, Christian-based, and it'll be a structured program with intensive counseling, group counseling, and art therapy. So how can you be a part? You can volunteer. We have a volunteer training to equip you for the work. So we generally do a volunteer training every other month, but we've been doing them every month this year so far. We'll have one this month, we'll have one next month, but it's going to continue because we have a lot of people that are interested right now. You can give a tax-deductible monetary donation. You can pray, because we certainly need your prayer covering on a daily basis. Or you can donate non-perishable food items for the food pantry or toiletry items. Volunteer opportunities that we have right now: you could be a receptionist at the drop-in center. You can help with fundraising or grant writing, help at special events. You can join our speaker panel if you just love to talk and be in front of people and doing presentations. You could host an awareness event that would be something similar to this, where we just do a presentation to share about human trafficking in Harriet's house. You could host a fundraiser, or you could join our prayer team. Everyone received a card, or everyone should have received a card when they came in. And on that card is a space that if you're interested in any of those opportunities, you can fill out the front and then check the boxes on the back that you're interested in. Our volunteer process is that you would attend a volunteer orientation. You would pay for and pass a background check. You fill out an application, meet with staff at the drop-in center for an interview, and you would receive additional training according to your interests and the position that you're interested in. So won't you join us in the fight? You can partner with Harriet's House, becoming a financial supporter, and you would have received another card that's specifically for that. So if you're interested in that, you can fill out that card. You can also partner with us by volunteering, donating items, and praying for the ministry. So how would you like to show your support? And the National Human Trafficking Hotline, again, it was at the end of that video, is up here. You can either call or text if you wanted to either report something that looks suspicious, or you knew someone who had been in that situation that wants to report themselves. And the last slide: you may choose to look the other way, but you can never again say that you did not know. And that was written by William Wilberforce, who was an abolitionist back in the day of slavery. So now, does anybody have any questions? No? Yes, Jason.
How many people do you guys currently see, like, on a weekly basis?
Okay, so we've opened the drop-in center in September, and we've had 75 people, or not people, but we've had 75 visits to the drop-in center. So what that means is it could be one person coming back multiple times, but since opening in September, which is not that large of a span, we've had quite an interest in people coming in to receive services. So not everyone coming in has received services for trafficking, but they've received food or clothing, toiletry items. We've been able to help. It's 409 Muir Street, and there are brochures at the door going out, and there's a table over here that has information about the drop-in center and the services we offer, and then also about our vision for Harriet's House. So if you want to grab some of those before you go, the address is on there too.
I got a question. Where do you take the canned goods and stuff if you like to donate them?
If you grab one of those brochures, there's a phone number on there. You can call and set up a time to do that, and we take drop-in or the stuff donations when the drop-in center's closed. So usually we're open Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday from 10 to 2, and Thursday evenings from 6 to 8. So we take drop-in or the donations outside of those hours. Yes.
You left out somebody. I have a friend whose son. Same thing.
Really?
Yes. So men, boys they're doing the same thing.
You're right.
2 boys are doing 2 girls, because she's so upset she doesn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Since you give me this, I'm going to call her and give her this information.
Okay, good.
Because she doesn't live here.
Mm-hmm.
She lives in this state. So she might call you from long distance and ask
Okay.
if she can go get some help.
And there's resources across the United States. So we have a connection. So if someone is interested in doing a residential program, we can get them connected to one that's located across the United States. Was there another hand over here?
I know recently the Floral Seasons Easton was hiring someone to support their work in human trafficking. And I know one of their job description was outreach to the middle schools and the elementary schools. Has Harriet's house been involved in that?
We haven't been involved in outreach to schools yet, but that is something that we want to get involved in. Yeah.
Do you have a recommendation for young men who need help?
I can talk with you. We have a connection to this national resource, so we could.
Maybe everybody else would like to know that, not just me.
Well, the connection that we have would be done through a referral system. So if you had somebody that needed help, we would have to fill out a referral form, submit it to this organization, and then they would find specific help.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Okay, I'm just going to close us with prayer. God, we thank you that you know all the situations that are going on with victims and survivors of human trafficking. And God, I just thank you for opening up our hearts and our minds, Lord, that you would show us what our part in this is. God, help us to see you as the one who has all the answers. And Lord, we just pray that you would lead us and guide us and direct us in how you want us to respond to the information that we received. And Father, we thank you for what you're doing to help men and women to get free. And we thank you that our hope is in you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.